Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the Squad, the group of liberal Congress people who are non-stop working to advance their agenda in Congress. The now infamous Democrat representative from Michigan's 13th Congressional District proposed a congressional resolution calling for a Nakba Day. Rashida Tlaib understands Arabic, but most people do not. Nakhba means catastrophe or tragedy. For the Palestinians, their Nakba was May 15, 1948, the day on which the modern state of Israel was created. The creation of the Jewish state is cause of all their misfortune. This is essential to understand, and Tlaib wants that day to be commemorated in the United States by Americans in all 50 states. According to Palestinians, all the problems of the Palestinians emanate from that epicenter, Israel's creation. All their problems, they believe, are because Israel was established in 1948. Tlaib wants U.S. recognition that Israel's establishment resulted in the destruction of the Palestinians. It is outright wrong. It is ahistorical. It is total propaganda. Frankly, it's galling. As an important note, the term Palestinian originally referred to Jews living in Palestine. Yes, Jews. You just need to look and check in the Oxford English Dictionary, the OED, and you'll see for yourselves. Arabs in Palestine were called Palestinians, in Arabic Palestinim. Only after May 28, 1964, that was the date the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, was founded. Only then. Before that, they were simply called Arabs who live in Palestine, or in Arabic, Al-Arab il-Falastini. That is, in fact, if you look at the passports of any Jew born in Israel before 1948, the place actually reads Palestine. The Tlaib resolution was sponsored by the usual suspects, the Squad, plus a few others, and minus one. Representatives AOC, Ilad Omar, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowen, Betty McCollum, Mary Newman signed onto the sponsorship. The Squad member, Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, was not a co-signer. That's interesting. Unclear why. Tlaib said, quote, "Today I introduced the resolution recognizing the Nakba catastrophe, where 400 Palestinian towns and villages were destroyed, over 700,000 Palestinians uprooted from their homes and made refugees," unquote. Congressman Lee Zeldin, Republican from New York, responded with an official statement. The root of the catastrophe, the Arab world refused to accept the UN plan for a Jewish and Arab state in what was left of the UK's Palestine mandate over Jordan's creation. Instead, 5 Arab armies invaded Israel, attempting to destroy it and push the Jews into the Mediterranean Sea. Zeldin continued, "This resolution is just the latest in a long line of anti-Semitic, anti-Israel statements, policies, and actions by the most radical voices in the Democratic Party. The resolution and the commemoration of the Nakba is proof that those who support these ideas do not embrace coexistence between Israel and her neighbors. Instead, they support Israel's annihilation. They fervently and steadfastly believe that the cause of all regional conflict is Israel's creation in 1948. These are the people who are always speaking out about, quote, the occupation, unquote, of the West Bank, when referring to the events that occurred in June 1967 during the Six-Day War, when the West Bank, the area being referred to, was brought under Israeli control. For them, the occupation is just a talking point. It serves them well. Their true grievance is not with the occupation. Their real problem is with Israel's very existence. Their agenda is the destruction, dissolution of Israel. The sad reality is that from the outset, Israel would have begrudgingly, but certainly shared the small parcel of land with the people now called Palestinians. But the Palestinians simply and unfortunately, and to this very day, refused to accept that option. Tlaib wants people to remember the displaced Palestinians. I understand that. But what she and others do not understand, what they refuse to realize, is that at the very same moment that Arabs living in the area became Palestinians, even more Jews were displaced from Arab countries. Over 850,000 Jews were expelled from their homes in Arab countries on the day Israel was created. Jews were not strangers to the Middle East. The Tlaib gang Those promoting Palestinian propaganda want to promote the theory that Jews were outsiders, that they were Europeans. But that's simply not true. The majority of Israel today, let's say for instance, is of Arab Jewish descent. Arab, but not Arab families, but Jews who lived in Arab lands, Arab countries, like Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Iraq, Morocco. There was a long and comfortable history of Jewish communal life in Arab countries. For example, at the time of the Jewish state was created, Jews had been living in Aleppo, Syria, for over 2,000 years. Overnight, they were evicted from their homes and expelled from the country. Israel took in all the refugees, all the expelled Jews, and these new Israelis helped build their new country. As a rule, the Jews of Arab lands tend to be right of center politically and religiously. They are skeptical of their Arab neighbors. They and their children and their grandchildren also speak Arabic. Interestingly, in 1948, Israeli Independence Day fell on the Gregorian date, May 15th. But the holiday is celebrated according to the Hebrew calendar, Israel Independence Day, Yom Ha'atzmaut. So the Gregorian date changes from year to year. The Nakhba does not make use of the Arabic calendar. It uses the Gregorian calendar, so it always falls on May 15th. It is the only Arabic day marked according to the Gregorian calendar that I know of. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a column from the Wall Street Journal. It was published on May 19th and was written by Howard Husak. The title of the column is My Synagogue's Anti-Semitism Tax. It's subtitled, More than 5% of our budget goes to security against mass shootings and other violence. Husak described a common issue, an issue that every synagogue in the U.S. is confronting, given the rise of attacks against Jews. How do you secure Jewish buildings and the Jews inside? The Wall Street Journal has an interesting feature called Houses of Worship, which regularly discusses relevant issues to the organized religious communities. This column is part of that feature. This is how the column begins. For the most part, serving on my synagogue's board of trustees hasn't involved dramatic decisions. Usually we discuss routine matters, such as how to pay for repairs on the house we provide our rabbi. During the pandemic, we debated whether to open the preschool or refund the parents' payments. But over the past several years, a worrisome matter has appeared on our agenda. I call it the anti-Semitism tax. More than 5% of our budget is now devoted to security to protect the congregation. That's more than $150,000 a year to prevent tragedies like the deadly attack on Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018, or the hostage-taking in Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas in January. We had long used funds to hire off-duty cops for high holidays to direct traffic, but this is much more serious. There is no doubt that this synagogue is spending quite a significant sum on security, and it is all because of a serious threat. This is not an illusion. Husak continues, every Jewish congregation is, as they say in accounting, a tub on its own bottom. There's no diocese or Sanhedrin to provide financial support. Membership dues keep the lights on. Security spending comes at the expense of other budget items, building repairs, new books for the library, or lower tuition for preschool parents, a key source of the new members we need to thrive as a community of believers. Ours is a reasonably well-off congregation, but those that aren't face harder choices. Husak explains that other groups are also targets, but not like the Jewish community. After conducting his own research, he discovered non-Jewish communities hardly even invest in security. Husak continues, yet, when I reviewed the budgets of mainline Protestant churches in my own community, I found no security line items remotely on par with those in my synagogue. Maybe we are more fearful because of our history, but the Jewish community has been the greatest target of religious-based hate crimes in the United States since official reporting started more than a quarter century ago. The numbers have risen in recent years. And so, Husak concludes, I'm also concerned about turning to government at all. Historically, Jewish communities have been devoutly self-reliant, whether in Jerusalem, Warsaw, or Shanghai, including in times of far greater risk than today. Seeking government help brings implicit complications. Will we be safe only in the years of budget surpluses? Will tensions arise as those of various faiths compete for funds? There already are more grant seekers than grants. In 2021, less than half of the nonprofit security grant applications received funding. We Jews have never taken government wisdom or good judgment for granted. Each week, we offer special prayer for our government, asking that God teach officials insights from your Torah, such that peace and security may abide in our midst. Note the use of may. The perceived need for such a prayer shows that we take nothing for granted. Still, for my part, when it came to a vote, mine was an aye on the budget that included security spending. Notwithstanding the Talmudic thinking above, I found that I couldn't be the one to say nay. Well stated. It's a shame that Jews of the U.S. are now so consumed with security, and it is also true that today a synagogue must set up systems and layers of defense. It is literally a crucial survival technique. Next up is a column from Reuters. It's called an analysis piece, and it's unauthored. The title is, "For Saudis, Hezbollah's setback is a rare good news from Lebanon." Subtitle, analysis, "Loss of a parliamentary majority for Iran-backed organization may present Sunni Muslim-led Saudi Arabia with new possibilities for reasserting sway in Beirut." The column, cum analysis, explains the significance of Hezbollah losing control of the parliament in Lebanon. And I'm quoting here, "For Saudi Arabia, losses for Iran's allies in a Lebanese general election mark a rare piece of good news from a country where Tehran has long been ascendant and could play to Riyadh's advantage in a regional tussle for influence. The loss of a parliamentary majority won by Hezbollah and its allies in 2018 is a reversal for the heavily armed group, a dominant force in Lebanon for years with unwavering support from Shiite-led Iran, and may present Sunni Muslim-led Saudi Arabia with new possibilities for reasserting sway in Beirut." This column now explains that once Saudi Arabia had walked away from Lebanon, Iran became the main influencer in Lebanon, and it continues. Saudi Arabia had largely washed its hands of Lebanon after spending billions to carve out influence, only to watch Hezbollah's role grow and Iran extend its regional clout via other proxies closer to home, including Yemen and Iraq. Amid signs of renewed Saudi interest in Lebanon, analysts believe Riyadh will maneuver cautiously rather than to dive fully back into a country where Shiite Islamist Hezbollah, founded by Iran's Revolutionary Guards, remains Lebanon's most powerful faction, with weapons that outgun the national army. Saudi Arabia's involvement in Lebanon will be welcomed by some, but not by all. Hezbollah will not be happy. Iran will not want to give it up. This is how Reuters analysis concludes their piece. This comes at a time when Saudi Arabia and Iran have been holding direct talks in a bid to contain tensions, with 5 rounds of discussion so far hosted by Iraq. Saudi Arabian columnist Tariq al-Hamouyed, writing in Ashraq al-Awsat newspaper, welcomed the election results in Lebanon and Iraq, but added that the road is long. Still, Lebanon did not appear to be a top Saudi priority compared to years gone by, said Nabil Boumansef, deputy editor-in-chief of Anwar's newspaper. Without a doubt, we are a priority for Iran. This is an interesting analysis of the situation in Lebanon. The question is, will Iran challenge Saudi Arabia? Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 6 cartoons and memes today. First up is a cartoon that makes fun of the shortage of baby formula. There are dozens of these cartoons, as serious and heartbreaking as the potentially life-threatening and dangerous it is to infants as it is hard not to make fun of the crisis. In this cartoon, we see shelves are empty. The shelves are labeled compassion, tolerance, patience, and empathy. One shopper says to the other, "And I thought baby formula was hard to find." It's true, lately we're facing a shortage of good character traits. Next up is a cartoon with a person at a gas station filling his car with gas, talking to a woman and sitting inside the car, and he says, "I call it our electric vehicle because every time we fill it with gas, we're in for a shock." Obviously, the cartoonist is poking fun at the high price of gas, and it's funny. It's also very high. Next up is a play on how Ukraine sunk the Russian flagship Moskva. A man in business attire, sitting behind a desk, with an incredulous look on his face, asks, "Let me get this straight. You lost your flagship in a land war to a force that does not have a navy?" This is so true and so funny. Ukraine does not have a navy. This next meme explains how it was possible that the first incident happened. The meme is based on questions one should never ask. This is similar to another meme we looked at a few weeks ago, but with a different twist at the end. It reads, "Never ask a woman her age, a man his salary, or a Ukrainian artillery crew where they got their targeting data." Well, we now know the answer. Obviously, that data comes from drones and from US and other NATO satellite intel. This next piece makes fun of what our children are learning in history. The teacher asks, "Can anyone tell me an important medieval battle?" "Me" is the answer. And the answer is Monty Python and the Holy Grail, the scene of the Black Knight. Now that's funny. It was funny in film with Monty Python, and it's especially funny in the meme. Finally, this last meme is a lure to get Putin to come to The Hague, which houses the International Criminal Court, the ICC, which tries war criminals. We see a picturesque photos of the airport, nice tourist spots, and glamour shot of the ICC. The caption reads, "The Hague, both a historical and modern city with many nice places. Putin should visit this beautiful city." That's funny. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. They call themselves the GDL, the Goyim Defense League. Their aim is to draw attention to their own Jew hatred, the hatred of Jews. 3 members of the GDL pulled in with their truck to the Beverly Hilton and shouted ugly anti-Jewish expressions at hotel guests. The truck was covered with anti-Jewish slogans. They shouted, "The Nazis are coming." 2 members of the group wore Nazi uniforms. The third wore a hat with fake side locks on it, peyote. They were trying to intimidate hotel guests. The police were called. Their website, Goyim TV, describes their vision this way: all members of the community and wider society should be treated as equals with the same rights, regardless of their race, age, sex, religion, political beliefs, or any other immutable attribute or self-assigned designation, unless you're a Jew or the Shabbos equivalent. The group's major philosophy is called replacement theory. They believe that Jews will replace whites in the United States. It is one of their group's mantras. They believe that the cabal, this cabal of elites, often Jews, mostly Jews, are trying to destroy white culture and race through mass migration and non-white peoples. That belief is often part of a narrative about white genocide and is manifested in the slogan, "You will not replace us. Jews will not replace us." You've heard this before. This group is very small, but Jewish-hating people, the sentiment is catching on, and others are starting to repeat this hateful rhetoric. Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad are hard at work preparing for their next attack and next war with Israel. They're using 3 major tactics to achieve their goals. Tactic number 1 is digging new tunnels. Tactic number 2 is developing better drones. And tactic number 3 is expanding their naval capabilities and capacities. The newly dug tunnels have been recently uncovered, some of them, by the IDF. They reach the Israeli border, but don't cross it. In times of war, Hamas hopes to emerge out of the tunnels on the Gaza side, close to the partition fence, and then break through it. The IDF sources say that Hamas has added 1,000 rockets to its existing arsenal since the end of Operation Guardian of the Walls last year. The big difference is that now Hamas is focusing on quality, not quantity, of their drones and missiles. The new arsenal is more accurate and more sophisticated than the previous weapons used. Hamas has well-trained drone teams that have not yet been targeted by Israel. They're also smuggling equipment through Egypt-Gaza border, as well as through civilian ships and shipments, utilizing shipments that actually show manufacturing and stronger engines to make boats that are already used by Hamas's military commando units to assemble explosive boats also. Hamas is more apt at warfare than they've ever been. Sand cats, also known as sand dune cats, are an endangered species. Ramat Gan Safari had 2 sand cats, one male and one female. One feline came from France and the other came from Sweden. The 2-year-old female just delivered 5 kittens. According to the safari staff, at first these 2 Europeans did not seem to get along so well, but as time went on, they got closer, grew fond of each other, and eventually mated. All 5 newborn sand cats in the litter have survived. Often, only 2 kittens survive, so this is an exception. The mother is very protective of her own newborns and barely lets the father come close. There were less than 10,000 of these endangered cats in the wild and only 178 in zoos across the world. At one time, there were sand cats in Israel. These are the only ones we have now. But with time, they became extinct. Now several zoos, like the Ramat Gan Safari, are taking part in efforts to boost the species' reproduction rate and to bring more sand cats into the world. The Israeli-born kittens will eventually be transferred to zoos in Europe, where they will, hopefully, continue to help the species increase their population. Israel is in the midst of the month-long set of drills called Chariots of Fire. The country is preparing for all the kinds of attacks that could possibly happen one day that they would face, and it's the largest, most comprehensive drill Israel has ever performed. The recent Chariots of Fire drill enacted in Tel Aviv. During the drill, it was as if missiles from Hezbollah hit the center of downtown Tel Aviv and destroyed the building. Israel actually destroyed the real building in order to truly train the participants. A senior officer who could not be named, who is a high-ranking member of the Home Front Command, explained, and I'm quoting, "The goal was to practice complex scenarios which could occur in the future. In the next military conflict, we could experience more frequent and more intense rocket fire, especially from Hezbollah, and the potential of more racially motivated riots across the entire country after the May riots last year," unquote. The IDF trained in 42 cities and towns. They trained in industrial areas across the country and activated sirens in as many as 61 communities as part of the drill. All to be prepared for the inevitable. One of the biggest fears for Israelis is that roads would be blocked by rioters, and that would prevent rescue equipment from getting to the sites and will block medical teams from evacuating the wounded. As part of the drill, the IDF was trained on how to remove rioters and free up the roads and the streets. The IDF will also use a completely different internet communication system so that it will be 100% reliable during any crisis that might arise. As we saw in the Reuters column we discussed earlier, there were elections in Lebanon and Hezbollah, and it turned out to be that Hezbollah was a big loser in the elections itself. With final results in, it is obvious that Hezbollah lost significant power. Let me explain. Hezbollah won 31 seats in this election, but in the last election, 2018, they had 29. So why did they lose if they got more? Here's how. Hezbollah's partners from the past parliament lost significant seats in the election. Because of that, Hezbollah, despite a gain of 2 seats, lost power. In bigger terms, this means that Hezbollah has lost control of the Lebanese parliament. It's actually good news for everyone except Hezbollah. I've been predicting this outcome for a few months now, and that's because in Lebanon, for the last several months, we have witnessed numerous signs and signals that average citizens in Lebanon are expressing anger at Hezbollah. They're repeating claims constantly that Hezbollah was putting the rest of Lebanon at serious risk, and that they were shouting that Hezbollah's priorities and Iran's priorities were not Lebanon's priorities. They were publicly saying that Hezbollah keeps poking Israel, and that when Israel strikes back, they hit at all Lebanese, not only Hezbollah. And through their votes, they made their point very clear, and that point was loud. Finally, life is getting back to normal. As one example, it's clear, as it did one day Every year before COVID struck, the New York City's great Fifth Avenue was transformed into a celebration of love of Israel. The 57th annual Salute to Israel parade had tens of thousands of spectators and tens of thousands of marchers from schools, synagogues, youth groups, Jewish organizations, police, fire, ambulance heroes. All told, there were 40,000 people proudly strode down the avenue, accompanied by marching bands and clowns on stilts, and of course, politicians. After a 3-year hiatus, necessitated by COVID, the theme that was chosen for this year's parade, in English, Together Again. In Hebrew, it was Kulanu Biyachad, we are together. The joy and love for Israel was palpable. An unabashed and proud lover of Israel, I was reviewing in the stands and cheered as the marchers went by. I spoke to many JBS viewers who told me both how excited they were to attend the parade and how essential a part of their lives JBS is. An electric celebration of 74 years Israeli statehood and independence, marchers made their way from 57th Street all the way to 74th Street. How appropriate. 57th's Salute to Israel Day Parade on 57th Street and ended on 74th Street, Israel's 74th anniversary celebration. When the parade first originated nearly 6 decades ago, marchers marched along Manhattan's Riverside Drive. This year's parade was all about Jewish pride. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that there have been many periods in Jewish history when Jews were persecuted? Over the years, the levels of persecution varied. Today, while there's a rise in hatred toward Jews, by no means does this Jew hatred reach the level of persecution. During the periods of persecution, though, there were different reactions and various responses to the persecution itself. Some were more effective than others. The most positive and most inspirational of those responses through the eras and through the ages is what I would recommend we all embrace today in combating Jew hatred. It's Jewish pride. Yes, there will continue to be hatred of Jews, but when you have Jewish pride, at least you are aware and conscious of the fact that you are a target because of your Jewishness. You know why you're a target of their hatred. Jewish pride is one of the secrets of Israel's great survival and growth and respected place in the world. There's no doubt. Israel has Jewish pride. Israelis know they are targets, not just of local terrorists, but of haters from all 4 corners of the world. Israelis know that they have one another and that they have a Jewish state and society that they can be proud of. They are governed by Jewish values, and that makes them unique, and uniquely Jewish and uniquely Israeli. In the diaspora, we too should embrace that Jewish pride. We should wear our Judaism with honor. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.